Right, apologies for that slight adjournment. We were trying to fix the YouTube stream. So I'll re-go through this. So each objector will be given the opportunity to speak, and we're asking objectors to limit this to no more than 5 minutes. Members may then ask questions of the objectors. We'll then hear from those speaking in support, and again, we're asking them to limit this to 5 minutes, and there may be questions. We'll then give the applicant their opportunity to make their presentation, which will be limited to the amount of time given to all of the objectors. Members can ask the applicant questions. There's no cross-examination. Members will debate the matter. The applicant will be given the final right of reply, and then we will move to the vote. So hopefully that's clear to everyone and acceptable. So if I now invite the Licensing and Public Protection Manager to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the renewal of a sexual entertainment venue licence in respect of under the Prom 109 to 113, the Promenade, Cheltenham. The applicant is European Events Consultants Limited. Director, Mr. Stephen Burrows, is present today, and he is represented by his solicitor, Imogen Moss from Poppleston Allen Solicitors. The renewal application is to authorise the premises to provide relevant entertainment on the dates and times outlined in 1.3.1 and 1.3.2 of my report. In addition, the applicants have also applied to vary 2 of the standard licensing conditions, and these conditions are Standard Condition 6 and Standard Condition 25. Would you like me to read those out, Chair?
For the record, that's probably helpful, please.
Thank you. So Standard Condition 6 should be varied to read as follows. There shall not be displayed outside the premises, in the immediate vicinity or elsewhere within the town, any advertisements that indicate or suggest that any form of relevant entertainment takes place on the premises. This includes the display of any advertisement, word, letter, model, sign, light, placard, board, notice, device, representation, drawing, writing, or any matter or thing, where illuminated or not, by means of externally displayed advertisements, such as on billboards or posters within the council's administrative area. 1. The applicant is allowed to solicit individuals to attend the premises during the hours the licence is in operation, provided that no solicitation takes place to anyone who appears to be under the age of 25. 2. The applicant is allowed to operate a courtesy vehicle to transport dancers and clientele to and from the venue at all times. Further, to be allowed to advertise, including by way of leaflets, the courtesy vehicle at all times during the permitted licence hours. No music will be played that can be heard from outside the vehicle. The use of the name Eroticats is permitted. Rationale explained in the application. The reason for this variation of this condition is to permit a vehicle to transport clientele to and from the venue at all times, and for staff to be permitted to give out leaflets for the courtesy bus in the town. Standard Condition 25 to be varied to read as follows. Any movement that indicates sexual activity or simulated sex between entertainers or performers is strictly forbidden. A copy of the application form is attached to Appendix A of your report. A copy of the location map is attached to Appendix B, and a copy of the plans for the premises are attached to Appendix C. A copy of the existing sexual entertainment venue licence is attached to Appendix D of your report. As you're aware, a site visit was conducted earlier today so that members could see the layout and the operation of the premises, and a full walk around was conducted so that they could understand the sexual entertainment venue when it is in place. On the 1st of October 2014, Council approved the adoption of the amended provision of Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982 to take effect in the borough on the 1st of December 2010. Since the adoption, any premises that want to offer relevant entertainment on a frequent basis can only do so by obtaining a sexual entertainment venue licence. Relevant entertainment is defined as any live performance or any live display of nudity which is of such a nature that, ignoring financial gain, it must reasonably be assumed to be provided solely or principally or for the purpose of sexually stimulating any member of the audience, whether by verbal or other means. Under the Act, premises can provide relevant entertainment on an infrequent basis without the need for a sexual entertainment venue licence. those premises do not have conditions attached to those licences. Sorry, there isn't a licence in place. The application has been advertised in line with statutory advertising requirements. In determining the application, members must have due regard to any observations made by the Chief Officer of the Police and any other comments made by any other person. Members are to note in particular that any objection must relate to both or either of the mandatory or discretionary grounds for refusal set out in my report. Objections made on moral grounds or values are not relevant to either the mandatory or discretionary grounds for refusal and should therefore not be considered relevant. In March 2024, a written warning was issued to the licence holder by Gloucestershire Police, and a copy of that is attached to Appendix F of your report. No other enforcement action has been taken previously or since that date, and the Chief Officer of Police did not raise any objections in relation to this application. In relation to this application, the licensing authority received 88 representations. These were made up of 27 objections and 61 representations in support of the application. These objections came from either residents or others during the statutory consultation period, and copies of those are outlined in Appendix E of the report. Each objection has been numbered for ease of reference. This application must be determined on its individual merits, taking into account the matters outlined in the report, the relevant statutory provisions, the authority's adopted policy, the relevant guidance issued by the Home Office, and any objections or comments made by the Chief Officer of Police and other persons. In particular, the committee must bear in mind that its ground for refusal of this licence application is restricted to those specified under the statutory, mandatory and discretionary grounds. For reference, these are outlined at paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5 respectively. As such, the relevance of representations made in relation to this application must therefore also relate to either the statutory, mandatory and discretionary grounds for refusal. The committee is also reminded that the authority does not take any moral stand in relation to operation of sex establishments, such as sexual entertainment venues, because the authority recognises that Parliament has made it lawful to operate a sex establishment, and that such businesses are a legitimate part of retail and leisure industries. It is the authority's role as the licensing authority to administer the licensing regime in accordance with the statutory provisions. As the application is seeking to vary the standard sexual entertainment venue licensing conditions, the committee must not arbitrarily deviate from its own adopted licensing policy. Where the committee consider there to be exceptional circumstances that may justify a deviation from its licensing policy, this must be thoroughly reasoned and recorded. As mentioned in my report, this venue sits outside of the council's designated permitted area and has been granted a licence previously. The council's policy is not to grant applications in this location, and if the committee does decide to grant this variation, it should give clear and cogent reasons for continuing to depart from that policy principle. In addition to my report and supporting appendices, the applicant's solicitors submitted a disclosure which has been circulated to all parties prior to today's hearing. We have several interested parties wishing to speak at today's meeting. 2 interested parties have also submitted written statements which will be circulated to all present today and will be read out by Democratic Services. Having considered all the relevant matters, the committee must decide whether to grant the application as applied for, grant the application subject to any additional terms, conditions and/or restrictions that are either specific to the licence or standard conditions, or refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. First question is, have you received any complaints about this applicant working out of these premises? And the second question is, are the timings the same for this application as they were for the previous application?
Thank you, Chair. No complaints except for the letter in the report have been received, and the times and hours are the same as the current licence.
And just following up on that, regarding the letter, were the licensing team satisfied that the actions taken after the breaches were satisfactory?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the licensing authority was satisfied, and also Gloucestershire Police licensing officer was also satisfied with those steps that were taken by the licence holder.
Any further questions? Okay. Are there any questions from the applicant? No. Are there any questions from supporters? No. Are there any questions from the objectors? No. Excellent. Right. So we now move on to taking representations from those objecting. So if I can ask the person who made representation number 52 to enable the microphone, and then you have your 5 minutes to address the committee, and we may have questions for you afterwards.
Hello. So I'm here to object to the European Events application to use Under the Prom as a sexual entertainment venue. I understand that the frequency exemption means the council probably feels it has no choice but to issue this licence, but I ask that they avoid watering down their own licence conditions. As I'm sure they know, these conditions did not come out of thin air. They're an attempt to mitigate the inherent harm of strip clubs. The council's own 2020 Community Impact Statement describes the inherent risk for performers working in sexual entertainment venues and states the council is aware that females in particular feel disadvantaged by the sexual entertainment and licensing of SEVs. This is manifested in both a general sense of feeling objectified and more specifically through feeling intimidated and unwelcome in the vicinity of licensed SEVs. This is not a moral issue. It is one of public protection, safeguarding, and the council's duty of care to its local community. Working in a strip club is not like working on stage as a dream boy or a drag artist. Women working in clubs are subject to particular financial, mental, and physical harm. The Not Buying It website describes these in detail. For example, it says lap dancing is routinely presented to women as an easy way to make money. The reality is very different. Women pay in advance to work, and then they work for free until they are bought for a private dance. They are also subject to fines. Research shows that 70% of women have finished a shift owing money to the club they were working in. We also hear that lap dancing is empowering. This, again, is hard to believe if you have read the Not Buying It testimonies from survivors that describe abuse, PTSD, and constant propositioning from both customers and staff. The house mother has previously told us that this is the safest club that she has worked in and that she does her best to ensure the best possible experiences for both women working in the clubs and the customers. I'm sure this is true, but there is a real limit to what can be done to limit the harm of these clubs. I'd like to see the council at least enforce the licence conditions that stop Erotocats touting for business by soliciting, leafleting, and using a marked vehicle. But I suspect that we will hear that this is a legitimate business and no such limits are required. We might also hear that if clubs are not licensed, then they will be driven underground. Evidence from around the world shows that this is not the case. Supply creates demand, not the other way around. There is no inherent
Oh, can you pull? Can you hang on your microphones? Yeah. Do you want to try and press the button again? Sorry.
Okay, not quite sure where it ran out, but right, so supply, evidence from around the world, basically supply creates demand, not the other way around. There's no inherent need for men to buy dances from women, but if this is normalised, then it will happen. Licensing, leafleting and touting for business is normalising lap dancing. Men are being groomed to treat women as pieces of meat that can be purchased for a dance. So please enforce the licensing conditions. They were introduced for good reasons and they should be respected. I appreciate the letter you've just given us, I know you've done work on this and I really appreciate that. And I ask that Cheltenham Council continue to lobby the Home Office to remove the frequency exemption. And I'm sure, I'm not an expensive lawyer, but according to the Not Buying It guidance, strip clubs and the law, this is a relatively easy process which does not require new legislation. So I hope Cheltenham Council will support, and I'm sure they do support, their MP Max Wilkinson, who says the exemption in the law that allows pop-up sexual entertainment makes a nonsense of licensing regulations and creates added risks for women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the objector from the committee? Councillor.
You refer to the community impact statement in your statement, where you quote, "There is an inherent risk for performers given the environment they operate in." Further, following on in that same paragraph, it states this is not as a direct cause of anything the authority is responsible for, but is within the authority's power to regulate. Hence why we like to regulate it. So do you understand why we prefer to regulate it? Because that is that is something we can be responsible for.
Yes, I understand that. I understand the council is in a very difficult position and that, basically your hands are tied at the moment, and the best of the two not very good options are that you license the venue and that you attempt to enforce regulations. And, I know you're in a difficult position.
Any more questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, just a bit of a clarity, really. You mentioned about leafleting. Are you aware that the leaflets that are handed out or they intend to hand out are not actually for the club, but for the transport? Now, it might seem that this is a technicality, but from the images of those leaflets, it does make it quite clear that that bus is very much for security reasons, and the leaflets are for the transport, not leaflets, that they're not allowed to leaflet on behalf of the club as such.
Yes, I understand that distinction, and that, maybe that wasn't made clear in my what I just said. But yeah, let's not be naive here. It's got the name of the club. People have got Google. It's also got the phone number. And so, if you're selling a business, what you want is contact details. And so, as a result of these flyers being given out, Eroticats are able to build up a very substantial potential client list. So I see this as an inherently harmful leaflet that's being given out.
Any further questions? Okay, so in terms of asking the council to do more, so we've written to the Local Government Association, which represents all councils in at least England and Wales, if not Scotland. We've written to the Institute of Licensing, who've both declined to get involved in this issue, seeing it as a Cheltenham-only thing. We've written to the Home Office for the previous government, the Conservative government, and got a reply from Victoria Atkins that said that government wasn't interested in taking any further action. We've written to the current government, and you have a reply from Jess Phillips saying that the current government isn't interested in looking at it. Alex Chalk, KC, when he was the town's MP, asked questions in Parliament and the government said they weren't interested in it. The late Lord Jones of Cheltenham asked questions in the House of Lords, and other than demonstrating a lack of understanding of what SEV was, which was rather embarrassing for the Lord who answered the question, that part of government declined to act on it. And Max Wilkinson MP has also asked questions in Parliament, and the government have again declined to take any further action. So what more do you think that this council could actually do on that? There were a lot of representation saying the council should do more. What more do you think we can do? I would say if you want the law changed, it's down to other people to write to Jess Phillips MP. But do you agree with that, or do you think there's something we've missed?
I'm afraid I don't recall your original letter, but I really appreciate, like I said, you're in a difficult position and you have done a lot, and I really appreciate that. Similarly, there's always difficult situations, aren't there? But you don't just stop, you keep on plugging at it. And it does feel like Cheltenham is really getting the raw end of the deal with this exemption. And yeah, I think that response from Jess Phillips was unacceptable. So yeah, please keep at it. That's all I can say.
No further questions? Okay. So if I can now move on to ask the person who made representation number 68 to address the committee, please.
Thank you. Gloucestershire Women's Liberation Collective would like to thank the Licensing Committee for the opportunity to contribute to this evening's meeting. We object to the application made by European Events Consultants Limited, trading as Erotic Acts, to renew and vary a sexual entertainment venue licence to allow for stripping at Under the Prom to coincide with race meets at Cheltenham Racecourse in November and during race week. We note again that our letter was one of a significant number of objections expressing concern about the negative impact that SEVs have on the lives of women and girls in Cheltenham. Objectors consistently raise the issue of and recognise the links between the sexual objectification and commodification of women which underpins the sex trade, the sexist and misogynistic attitudes that permeate society, and the endemic abuse and harassment of women and girls. We continue to be concerned that the committee has not given detailed consideration as part of their public sector equality duty to the sex-based equality concerns repeatedly raised by objectors. We would remind the committee that it must give due regard to all three equality objectives in its decision-making. Whilst the committee gives consideration to the advancement of equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it, in respect of equal access for customers of the strip club and the provision of sexual entertainment by male performers or as part of LGBT plus events, it fails to fully engage with the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation of women and girls and foster good relations between men and women within the context of a national emergency of men's violence against women and girls. Strip and lap dancing clubs where women are sexually objectified and the idea that men are entitled to access women's bodies is reinforced. Where that is reinforced, contribute to harmful sexist and misogynistic attitudes that underpin the endemic abuse, harassment and violence against women and girls in society. Objectors have referenced a number of research papers, including those referred to in the Safe and Equal Bristol report, which was compiled by an umbrella group of Bristol-based stakeholders and professionals in the field of gender equality and sexual and gender-based violence, which evidenced the link between harmful attitudes, a culture that perpetuates and reinforces these messages, and the perpetration of sexual violence. Yet we remain in the dark as to whether the committee members have engaged with this research in considering their public sector equality duty. Breaches of SEV policy standard conditions in respect of touching, both between performers and between customers and performers, were identified during inspections at Under the Prom during Race Week 2024. We remain concerned that breaches of licensing conditions have occurred that may have harmed women performing in the venue and increased risk for other women working there. We are also concerned about the implications that these breaches of conditions may have for women and girls outside of the strip club. We're extremely concerned, given the breaches that occurred in March, that the applicant has requested a variation to standard condition 25 to allow for bodily contact between performers. This variation was agreed by the committee at the November licensing meeting in respect to the applicant's venue at Jessup House. We feel strongly that variations to standard conditions are being agreed, which could put women performing in the venue at an increased risk of harassment and/or assault. If a SEV licence is granted, we would ask that this variation of the standard conditions is not permitted. Additionally, we would ask that performances in booths are not permitted to ensure that performance areas can be better supervised. More generally, we would ask that the safety of women working in the strip club, as well as women and girls in the wider community, is prioritised and the committee applies the SEV policy standard conditions without variation. The applicant has submitted an equality impact assessment as part of their final disclosures submitted on Monday of this week, with the express aim of assisting members of the committee in determining the SEV application. We note that a similar EIA was submitted as part of the applicant's recent disclosures in respect of the SEV licence at Jessup House, and that it was welcomed by the committee as making a useful contribution to members' understanding of the public sector equality duty. We would remind the committee that they cannot delegate their obligations under the PSED. We would further point out that the submitted EIA does not consider the impact of sexual objectification, harmful attitudes and the link to the perpetration of sexual violence and the research evidence provided by objectors in this respect, and therefore fails to fully consider the sex-based equality concerns for all women and girls that arise from stripping at this venue. We note that the committee recognises that the existence of the frequency exemption has led to the creation of exploitable loopholes. We hope the committee has listened to the negative feedback about the use of the frequency exemption during race meets, and that the committee recognises the effect that the frequency exemption's continued operation has in undermining the exercise of local democracy. We hope the Cheltenham Borough Council will support efforts to repeal the frequency exemption. And finally, we urge the committee to listen to the voices of women and girls and show a commitment to their public sector equality duty in deciding the outcome of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, I hope you'll excuse me, but in an effort to try and get through a very long passage, I was really struggling to get. You were speaking far too quickly, and so I may have missed an awful lot. But the one thing I did want to question, you mentioned diversity issues. You mentioned male strippers. I didn't quite get the relevance of that. But you seem to suggest, and maybe I've got this totally wrong, that there was a diversity issue within this application. Only we're sort of led to believe that totally the opposite is true. So can you just either elaborate on that, or maybe I've got it wrong and that I missed something?
Apologies if I was talking too quickly. I was conscious of 5 minutes and I hadn't timed what I was saying, so I was at a speed that you can digest it. Yes, no, I acknowledge that. The point that I made and the examples of referencing male performers and considering other groups that may rely on, might either be applying for SEV licences or may rely on the frequency exemption, was that just an example that you are considering that sort of first limb of the equality objectives of the public sector equality duty. I'm just sort of acknowledging that. So the sort of advancement of equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristics and persons who don't. So I was just acknowledging that you know in your deliberations you often sort of consider that and reference that. But what I'm sort of pushing for is those other two limbs of the equality objectives. I feel there's sort of more consideration that needs to be given to think about the elimination of discrimination, harassment and victimisation of women and girls, and fostering good relations between men and women. So those are the kind of those two limbs of the three are sort of, where my concerns are sort of rooted, and I'm sort of requesting sort of more consideration, particularly of the research evidence that objectors have provided over the course of a number of applications, and more sort of deliberation and consideration of those elements. So that was the point I was making, but I'm sorry, I rattled through that and that wasn't necessarily very clear. So I hope that's a bit clearer.
Any further questions? So from me, when you talk about the public sector equality duty and the other parts of this, as a committee, we've got a choice effectively of we license and it stays in one place for the duration of race week, and it has all of the licensing conditions that the committee puts on it, which include things that aren't just within the premises. So they're there to protect the performers, the customers, the people working there who are not performers, and the public at large as far as can be dealt with. So you've got a 30-metre SIA, the SIA staff, the door staff are meant to look 30 metres around the premises, which is a reasonable expectation. So if we license and we put those conditions on, we aren't just protecting one group, we're doing the best we can within the legislation. The other option is that if we refuse, it will use the frequency exemption at a different premises each night, and there won't be these licensing conditions. So in terms of the PSED judgment, which of those two options, which I think we all agree are not ideal, but which of those two is, in your view, is better for us trying to meet that, given the limited choices that we have?
Yeah, no, I absolutely acknowledge that you're in a difficult situation with the existence of the frequency exemption. So I would, I'm keen, and I think I mentioned it in my representation, that the standard conditions, that they are being varied in quite a number of areas. So in terms of sort of keeping things running as safely for all parties involved, obviously my particular interest is women and girls, that those standard conditions should be applied as originally drafted. And I absolutely accept that the frequency exemption creates, difficulties, to say the least, and we've had a bit of a discussion already about the efforts that the council is going to try and raise that with the relevant parties. I note that in Jess Phillips' letter, actually, she did say we will keep it under review as part of our wider work to ensure that local people are able to contribute to the development of their community. And I'm hopeful that when the government announce their strategy on violence against women and girls, we'll see more about commercial sexual exploitation, and therefore maybe there's another opportunity to raise it then. So and you're quite right, it's for individuals within the community as well to be lobbying their MPs and asking for this repeal. So absolutely, and I would hope that we can, as a force, together, keep on about this point, so that there's sort of more of a kind of level playing field, I suppose, in Cheltenham, and you're sort of not held in this very difficult tension. So yeah.
Thank you. The other question, just as a sort of looking at the conditions. So at the moment, the condition 25 that's being asked to be varied says any bodily contact between entertainers or performers. Now, would you agree that if, for example, two performers walked past each other and brushed past each other or held hands, that their hands touched each other, or something like that was perfectly innocent, innocuous? That's not what this condition is trying to capture. Would you agree that that's part of what it means, and that if it's being misinterpreted by those enforcing it, this may explain the applicant's attempt to try and quantify what we actually don't want happening, rather than enforcement for things that are not really stuff that is material to safeguarding anyone.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making there. I kind of assume we haven't got huge amounts of detail, have we, about the breaches? So I would hope that enforcement wouldn't be enforcing, a brush of a shoulder, that wouldn't be deemed to be a breach, because that does seem totally disproportionate. But obviously we don't have the detail there. So I've made an assumption. I have to admit, I've made an assumption that the written warning was given because there was something more than that. So I'm sort of working on that basis, not having that exact detail.
Thank you. Not seeing any further questions. Okay, so now we have an absentee representation which will be read out by Democratic Services.
Just so you know, this is the words of the objector and is written in the first person. So I'm just reading it as it's been sent to me. So I'm writing to object to this application for the renewal and variations of a licence to operate a strip club under the Prom in Cheltenham. Whilst I acknowledge the existence of the frequency exemption enacted by Schedule 3 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982, there are several areas of concern that require scrutiny and amendment in relation to the conditions applied to this licence should it be granted. Outside of race events, there is no demand for stripping in Cheltenham. There are no permanent strip clubs operating in the town. It is therefore reasonable to conclude the demand and supply for stripping in Cheltenham is controlled by the operators. This is further supported by the removal of licensing conditions that allow operators to solicit customers. I note that the location for the venue is outside of the council's designated permitted zone. Whilst there are other licensed premises in the location, I understand that none operators license strip clubs. Licence conditions in relation to touching. All of the licences issued for venues in Cheltenham contain conditions 18 and 25, prohibiting touching between performers and customers. During March 2024 Race Week, multiple breaches of these conditions were observed under the Prom during a number of inspections, resulting in a written warning being issued by the police. These breaches have occurred despite the assurances of the venue owner, whose statement to this committee on the 4th of October 2023 noted the following. He stated that the licence stipulates 4 door staff, whereas they always have 8. There will be added security for Eroticats, who also provide their own extra security. Licence stipulates 16 security cameras, but they have 48. Eroticats also provide their own whilst they operate on the premises. The reality is, Under the Prom has joined the very long list of strip clubs in the UK where breaches of conditions, viewed as essential for the regulation of stripping, are frequently observed. In spite of all of the additional measures listed by the venue owner, it is clear that the breaches of conditions cannot be prevented. It is concerning that the applicant is requesting a variation to standard condition 25. This will be argued as clarification to avoid, in inverted commas, technical breaches in relation to bodily contact between performers. Whilst it is possible for the committee to deviate from the council's SEV policy, a good reason is required for any deviation. The key question is whether an exception can be made without harming the point of the policy's purpose. I do not believe that a case can be made for this variation, particularly in light of the multiple breaches in March 2024. Watering down rules governing no contact fundamentally undermines the purpose of the council's own SEV policy. It appears to be more a case of, we can't stick to the rules, so let's change the rules. Excuse me. Special condition, joint working with Cheltenham Borough Council in relation to VAWG. It is unclear from the application whether the applicant is seeking to include the special condition wherein the licence holder would work jointly with Cheltenham Borough Council to promote the safety of women in relation to Race Week each year. As outlined in my written objection, an FOI submitted to Cheltenham Borough Council found no relevant records on the council's case management system of any joint working, and inquiries to the wider council to establish what work was jointly undertaken were not responded to. This raises serious questions regarding the inclusion of this condition and the apparent subsequent lack of agreed joint working, action or monitoring by the licensing team, this committee and the council members responsible. In conclusion, if the committee grants this renewal, there is no compelling rationale or argument that supports deviating from the standard licensing conditions within the council's SEV current policy. I would ask that the variations requested are not permitted and that the committee stops allowing performances in booths given the multiple breaches in March 2024. As noted above, I would suggest that the special condition is reviewed given the apparent lack of agreed joint working, action or monitoring by Cheltenham Borough Council. If the condition is maintained, I would recommend that the council's V8WG partnership group is tasked with agreeing and monitoring any joint working with the licence holder. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, there's no real opportunity for questions as the person isn't here. So now we can move on to those speaking in support of the application. So the first person who I will ask to speak is the person who put in representation number 77. Supporters. Rep 77. Oh.
Yeah.
My name is Philip Jordan. I am the venue owner. I have worked with Eroticats for the past 9 years. As it's rightly been pointed out in the last objection, we do have far more cameras than is necessary for our venue to operate. We do the same with the door staffing. I feel very confident about the way that we operate as a business and the way that we have operated the business with Eroticats over the last 9 years. We work very closely with the police and licensing. We fulfil a number of roles with Night Safe, Purple Flag and the bid. We put our name to this because we feel very confident about the way that Eroticats operate and in turn how we operate as well. Ultimately, I've built my life, my career in Cheltenham. As of a consequence, I would want to be putting my name to something that wasn't fulfilling the licensing objectives that we have with the venue. And I have worked within venues where I've managed venues that don't have the application of the SEV in place. The accountability isn't there. The procedures aren't there. In my mind, how we're doing things is the best way to go around the activity.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I just wanted to clarify actually from the previous objection, and I think it's a question that can be addressed by others. Two things. The venue is outside the normal area, so could we clarify, and I know that it has been granted previously, so therefore it's quite difficult for us to step away from that, but could we clarify why it was allowed outside the area? And I think the multiple breaches is only 3. Can we just confirm that, please?
This was questions for the supporters, so I think that might be stuff we need to address separately. Are there any other questions?
I can refer to those in my submissions if you'd like.
Please. Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, the objector made a point. It was a general point about other venues, not necessarily your business, that performers sometimes leave owing the club money. Is that ever a situation?
No.
I think we're moving to asking the wrong person the questions. So hopefully one that you can answer. So under the prom's got part of our nighttime late night entertainment and is normally licensed as a nightclub. Can I just check that the sort of patio area behind the premises is open quite late, and also what the normal terminal hour is for your weekend licenses?
The rear of the venue is protected by Harris fencing. That is the same for the SEV as well. Our hours of operation allow us to trade until 6 a.m.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we now, and I'm not seeing any other hands, so we now move on to ask representation number 18.
Hello. I have worked for Eroticats since the beginning, which is well over a decade now. I began as a performer and later took my current role as a position as senior house mother. My role within the operation includes, but is not limited to, ensuring all performers know the rules, the layout, the procedures of the event and where to find me or other help if they need. Advising and finding solutions to any potential issues, helping with anything to do with travel arrangements, availability of space for breaks, general questions and often just to chat. Getting performers to the courtesy bus that has been mentioned, the bus is integral to the safety of the performers, whilst it does bring customers to the venue during the night. Once checkout opens and the office starts cashing ladies out, it takes staff home to their transport links, to their accommodation. Customers are never in the same vehicle, and as far as I know, that will never change. I do take this role very seriously, but I enjoy it hugely. I absolutely understand the importance for advocating for the safety of women and girls, and I understand anyone that feels unsafe during race week. With a huge influx of men in the town during this time, it's hard not to. The statistics show the aforementioned to be true. However, correlation does not equal causation. Strip clubs are not making women feel unsafe. It's the increase of men in town. I work alongside an amazing security team who enforce a zero tolerance approach to any sort of inappropriate behaviour. And I will be bold and say that I think women, in my opinion, are safer in this venue during race week than anywhere else in the town. The conversation really must shift from trying to take away opportunities for women to earn money in a safe place to policing the bad behaviour of men within the community. We have performers and customers who return year after year from all over the country, all ages, all backgrounds, all genders, which is a testimony to the amazing reputation that Steve and the team have curated over the years. If we don't have a licence, these events, you run the risk of illegal, unlicensed and regulated pop-ups operating underground. I have worked unregulated events, not for races, but I have worked them. Whilst you may remove Eroticats from the picture, trust me, somebody will certainly fill that gap in the market with underground illegal pop-ups. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, those people will exploit the women and customers within them for quick cash. I know this isn't about the Dream Boys, but I will say that they operate under the exemption. They don't get anywhere near the backlash. It does feel a little bit unfair at times. I will happily answer any questions regarding communal booths and why they pose more issues to performers than they do good within the industry, not just for Eroticats. I've done this for 14 years now. Communal dance rooms are not something that performers want. To grant this licence means we will have a regular, safe, structured premises to work at that is regulated by the laws and conditions that I welcome. As long as this activity remains legal and this company operates in a safe, fair manner, I will continue to support any licence that it applies for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, it strikes me that your role within the business is certainly a big step in the right direction for safety's sake. Someone that's not a direct employee, but someone that sits in the middle. Is this a normal role, and would the majority of other clubs, would they have the role that you do, or is this not necessarily unique, but the exception to the rule within this club?
So house mums are in most clubs. Most decent clubs, you would have a house mum, yes. I have done it in a few other venues. Obviously, there's a lot more performers than some of the other clubs I've worked at. But yeah, it's a common role. It's the buffer between sort of the admin side of it and the actual evening, and the performer, someone they can relate to. They're usually female as well.
Further questions? So just one from me. In your experience, and I asked this, but just to keep I've asked this before, but in your experience, do you prefer working in a premises that's licensed in one place, or do you prefer working under the exemption?
We will always prefer the licence. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. Right, so now we have a representation from an absentee supporter. So again, if I can ask Democratic Services to please read that one out.
Again, these are the words of a supporter and are written in the first person, so I'm just going to read it as it is. So, I've worked the Cheltenham event for Eroticats now for about 10 years. The reason I keep coming back is because of the safety and respect I feel from them as a company towards dancers. My first experience of working in Cheltenham prior to that was for an unlicensed event, and it nearly put me off going back until I was told about Eroticats due to their reputation amongst dancers all over the country. The event I worked at prior was unsafe. We didn't know where the fire exits and security were. I remember broken glass in a dance room, and this room was communal, which meant men hadn't paid to see me dance were able to watch for free, and is completely degrading as a woman. I know my worth. There were also multiple fights because men who didn't know each other were in the same room and security couldn't get girls to safety in time. I have seen none of this in my time working for Eroticats. I have personally become quite fond of Steve and the team, just don't tell them that. They are great people to work for, and I honestly can't fault this well-run event. I have worked at multiple venues for them over the years. There is always a house mum to induct all dancers properly too, where we are shown all the facilities, fire escapes, where to go if there is a problem, which I can't say happens often. Without the event being able to license and remain in the same venue, this changes every night, and in a case of an emergency would statistically reduce the number of girls who could get to safety, as reaction times to an emergency would be much slower as the venue is not familiar. All the practical and factual parts aside, I'm a single mum of 2 amazing children. My mum is disabled and lives in an annex on my house, a house I can only afford to take care of her in because of the job I do. I don't miss a school run, an assembly, a sports day, yet provide an above average lifestyle for my children, working just 2 to 3 days a week back home. Cheltenham is an event I rely on every year to boost my yearly salary, to save for those rainy days which were ultimately always on me. Without it being so well run and licensed, I wouldn't feel as safe to do so. I do the job because I love the freedom it gives me, the same way Ladies' Night or drag bingo events exist. This industry gives some welcome fun and light to a pretty rough world right now. This should not be gender exclusive because sometimes people from outside our industry haven't had the chance to see how safe we are, how much we love our jobs, and how invigorating and empowering it actually is to us. And our safety is paramount.
Thank you. Right, now we will hear from the applicant. So over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I can in the interest of time. I'm just going to do a bit of a summary, a bit of background, and address some of the kind of recurring themes in some of the representation. So we did consult with the responsible authorities as part of the application. We've heard that there's been no representation made by the police. The background we've got, you'll have seen the witness statement from Mr. Burrows in the disclosure documents, but the key points I wanted to sort of re-emphasise were he's a hugely experienced operator in the nighttime economy as a whole, and also in the operation of safe and successful SEVs. He's a Night Safe representative on the Business Crime Reduction Committee, and he takes any issues raised in the Night Safe Forum, including any wider town issues, to that Business Crime Reduction Committee. Historically, they have worked with GRASAC, with literature being provided within the Performer Welfare folder, which you saw today at your site visit. And now Steve is also working with the Cheltenham's Violence Against Women and Girls, VORG, group as the Night Safe representative. So we've looked at the mandatory grounds for refusal, and there's nothing within the mandatory grounds which have been invoked. We know that the regime for SEVs is strict, and as such, the factors that the committee will consider, we are turning to the discretionary grounds. Discretionary grounds A and B don't appear to bite, so the focus here is on C, number, and D, the character of locality. So addressing, I think one of the questions one of the committee members had earlier, under the prom is only just, like it's spitting distance outside the designated permitted area for SEVs. I think it's important to remember that under the prom, it's in the heart of the commercial district with numerous licensed premises around it. So I think actually for a location for an SEV, it makes sense. And the SEV has been there since 2023. So the committee should take this precedent into account when considering the application. So thinking about the representations then, no representation has been received from the police, and that's in part with the applicant's open and transparent attitude to operation. We always consult with the responsible authorities, being licensing and police, beforehand, because us as applicants, we want to know, you know, what the position is there anything more we can be doing? And we look to identify and deal with any areas of concerns, of which there haven't been any. So after the November event, the applicant reached out to the police for a debrief. There's usually a debrief after each of the March and the November events, and they were told that one wasn't necessary. And in the pre-consultation of the application, we have had discussions with the police regarding the rewording of condition 18 to make the nature of that condition clear to not just the operator but also the performers and the officers when they inspect. It's just that clarity that's needed. Individuals change with enforcement officers that come in and out, and I think for the operator, for the performers and for the officers, we need clear enforceable conditions, which I think now we've reworded that condition, it will be. We just wanted to make it clear, as was described earlier, that a performer simply brushing by another performer or trying to get their attention or something like that wouldn't constitute a breach, which I think just in the lack of commas in the current condition is kind of where it was going, but it could be interpreted either way, which is not really helpful for a condition on a licence, especially one that needs to be quite strict. So I think the rewording of that condition just makes it very clear, you know. And it also is for the safety performers who need to be able to communicate with each other, and also for, like I say, for an inspecting officer to have a clear and enforceable condition to work with. So looking at the representations themselves, I just want to go over a couple of themes and address some of the concerns that were raised. So some make reference to the concerns for women and girls in the community. There hasn't been any clear and direct evidence of SEVs being directly linked to that. There's no direct evidence of the SEV under the prom being directly linked to any incidents of violence against women and girls. Indeed, if you walk by under the prom, there'd be no difference to the exterior at all. You just see it as it's still the nightclub. It's a very, you know, it'd still be discreet. And actually, at SEVs, you know, the greater number of staff to customer ratio, the greater number of door staff, the greater number of CCTV, that ensures a smooth and a safer operation during these race events as possible. The issue of violence against women and girls is complex, and there's lots of many factors to consider. And I think simply laying the issue at the foot of SEVs when there is no direct evidence doesn't go very far to actually address the issues at hand. There are lots of references to removing the booths, and we've heard some very important testimonials from performers themselves that actually the booths are really important because communal areas just don't work for the safety of the performers. And actually it's in the council's own policy at Appendix 2 that contains the Sexual Entertainment Code of Conduct, and it states that private performances should only take place inside the screened off booths. So the applicant, they can't deviate from that requirement, nor would they want to. The breaches were referred to, but let's remember they weren't consequential enough for the police to put in an objection to the renewal application. They had a pragmatic discussion with the operators. They issued that letter, and you'll see page 73 of the report details the discussions that were had and the additional procedures added in by the applicant to address the concerns. Bear in mind that under the exemption, if they were operating under the exemption, that wouldn't be possible. The letter also references the applicant's good compliance history, which is extensive, as we've seen. There's references made to the marketing of events in the towns. The advertising of the courtesy bus is inoffensive. It's been reached as an agreement for a number of years now, and the applicant has an agreed flyer that promotes the bus, not the SEV. The phone number that's on the bus isn't for the venue, it's for the courtesy bus itself. And also it's there as a safety. It's there, you know, if you're a performer coming into Cheltenham, you know what that bus looks like, you know what number you call in, and you're not going to step into some unregulated taxi or anything like that. It's there for the safety of performers and for customers as well, to be honest, on race week with so many people coming in and out of the town. It's there and it works as a helpful way to ensure safety during those events. Again, a lot of the representations refer to the frequency exemption. The applicant can only work within the legislative regime that exists. SEVs are a lawful activity, and different members of the public want different things from their towns and cities, and there's always a balance to be made. Some people want to go to SEVs, as indicated by a number of the supporting representations. The applicant has invested significantly in Cheltenham, both as a business owner and employer in terms of financially and time. There's nothing secret or anything like that about the way in which the applicant operates or what the applicant is actually requesting. Like I say, it's a lawful activity being carried out in a way in which the applicant has been asked to do so. You know, they wanted specific venues to be licensed, so it was clear there was able to have inspections, conditions, all that kind of clarity, open and transparency that operating under the exemption doesn't give. Some representations are worded in such that they object to the licensing of SEV, but also talk about the risks of operators operating under the exemption. And we already heard from an objector that actually, you know, there's no disagreement that operating under a licensed venue is better. The licence has previously been renewed. Nothing has changed, not the applicant, not the venue, not the setup, and your legal advisor will no doubt advise you that the council's approach should be consistent. Also, SEVs, it's strict legislation. They have to be renewed annually. If you don't run a tight ship and you come back here in 12 months to renew your licence and you've been having consistent, significant breaches, you're not going to get your licence renewed. You've got that comfort that actually, you know, if we come back here in 12 months and we haven't kept up to our promises as the operator, you have significant powers there to not renew. One representation talks about the special condition, which we heard about, and we can see from the witness statement that the applicant has given clear commitment to dealing with the issues of VOG and is deeply involved with the nighttime economy, not just during race week, but actually throughout the whole year, and not just, you know, when the SEVs are in operation. Steve's passionate about the nighttime industry in Cheltenham as a whole, and it's clear from his willingness to give clear lines of communications with the authorities and also with his participation in NightSafe. It's also important to note there's 61 supporting representations that give details on the applicant's responsible attitude to running SEVs. It reiterates his involvement with NightSafe. And I just want to quickly quote representation 75, which I think sums up the key considerations quite neatly. So it goes on to say, in recent years, we have found ourselves ending the evening at one of these establishments. Contrary to the outdated stereotypes, licensed lap dance clubs have become well-regulated venues that provide a safe and controlled environment for all patrons, irrespective of gender or relationship status. I firmly believe that maintaining licensed lap dance clubs in Cheltenham during the festival is essential for several reasons. One, safety and regulation. Licensing ensures that these venues operate within strict guidelines, protecting patrons and performers alike. This prevents unregulated activities from taking root and safeguards the community. Two, preventing criminal influence. By keeping such venues under the oversight of Cheltenham Borough Council, the risk of criminal elements exploiting unlicensed or underground establishments is significantly reduced. And three, inclusivity. The modern appeal of these clubs extends beyond traditional demographics, attracting diverse groups, including women and couples. These establishments provide a welcoming environment when operated within the law. It is vital to recognise that the presence of licensed lap dance clubs during the festival contributes to the broader entertainment landscape without detracting from the rich heritage and prestige of the National Hunt Festival itself. Cheltenham's licensing system ensures these venues remain safe, respectful and free from harmful influences. So just to sum up, the subcommittee will take an evidence-based approach in determining its application that's put in front of them. Again, just to remember, in this context, the police are experts on the matters of crime and disorder, and they have not sought to object to the application. There's no evidence to substantiate claims that the premises will fail to operate in any kind of lawful and safe way. And there's no evidence which supports representation suggesting that the SEV has any kind of significant harm on the wider community. And also, let's remember, the SEV is operating on a very limited number of days. So again, the detrimental impact on the local area there's no evidence that would be the case. The applicant has, in our respectful submission, shown a robust operation. You know, even with the letter in March, there was that contact, that dialogue, and immediately things like lighting, CCTV, all that was implemented straight away, which again you wouldn't be able to do in the respect of an operation using the exemption. I would suggest to the committee that granting the SCV on the renewal, on the terms applied for, that's going to continue to provide a safe environment for the patrons and for performers. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Sorry, was there something? No. Oh, right. So, are there any questions? I could see an arm waving at me, but I wasn't sure. Are there any questions? I think you addressed the points that. Have you had the points that you raised earlier both answered? In which case, we now move to the member debate. So let me just read out the reminder. So before I open this to debate, I will remind you it's important that you give due regard to the council's licensing policy, and that if you deviate from that policy, you give clear reasons for doing so. It's important that you only take into account material licensing considerations, and that your decisions are reasonable, proportionate and rational. Who wants to start? Councillor Boyes.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, just for a matter of public record, I just wanted to repeat this again, that, and it's been said quite a few times this evening, but we have to recognise that Parliament has made it lawful, to operate a sex establishment, and that such businesses are a legitimate part of the retail and leisure industries. And we must administer the regime in accordance with the law. We must have regard to any observances made by the police. The police did not raise any objections. I'll come on to the letter in a minute. There aren't any mandatory grounds for refusal that I can see at all. With regards to any discretionary reasons to refuse this, is the applicant suitable? Well, we have seen over a number of years that they have suitable. I asked the question if there's been any complaints about this applicant. There have not been. The police did send in the letter about the issues of touching, but it has been reiterated that the police and Cheltenham Council licensing team are satisfied that appropriate steps have been taken and that has been dealt with. Don't see any reason to believe that anyone other than the applicant will be carrying out the business. The authority has already resolved that it will not set a limit on the number of SCVs in the designated permitted area, provided they are not near sensitive areas. I think the committee are quite satisfied that there aren't any sensitive areas that are going to specifically overlook anything that is going on in that specific premises. The venue is situated slightly outside the designated area, but we have granted this before at this location, and it's still in an area of the nighttime economy. That we've discussed that before, and it's clearly within the area of the nighttime economy. Character of locality, again, it's within the area of the nighttime economy. The layout, character, and condition of the premises, I think they're acceptable. I appreciate the fact that Mr. Burrows is night safe rep on the VAWG group. That's great to hear. Again, no complaints over the years of being on this committee. I think I've been on this committee 6 years now, and We haven't seen any complaints come through, satisfied with that. And just addressing, I have read all the objections. I always read all the objections. I read all the links that are provided. And whilst not everyone agrees with sexual entertainment, it is lawful. And we cannot consider the moral objections. Public safety, the performer's safety, the safety of the customers is our absolute priority. That's what we're here to do. And I would always prefer for the premises to be licensed with the conditions than not be. So I can't see, I hope, Chair, that you can cover off on the public sector equality duties, because you're exceptionally good at doing that. And I think that's really important that we do. But that is, I don't see any reason to refuse this application.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, it's said, I believe, that the universe hates vacuums. If this company didn't run Eroticats, sorry, yes, beg your pardon. Some other company would fill the gap. It may be an unlicensed venue, one night at a time, which we have no control over. It might be another company who obtain a license but not operate to the standard of this company that we've dealt with for a number of years now. We've heard from a house mother, we've heard from performers, and I believe one of the a customer, all saying that they felt that this was a very tight ship that made everyone feel safe. So the old expression, the better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And as far as the venue being outside the normal permitted area, I think Councillor Boyes put it quite clearly. Yes, it is outside the designated area, but there is nothing no other sensitive properties around. Upstairs, next door, these are all businesses that will be closed, and again, not really sensitive. The only sensitive property might be the school at the back. Well, there is no access either visually or physically to the back when the operation's running. And anyway, the school would be closed at that time anyway. So I see no reasonable reason why we should refuse this application.
Thanks.
Only to say, I think Councillor Boyes and Councillor Wheeler have said everything I could possibly say.
Thank you. So just try to pick up a few other things that haven't already been said. So we need to look at why the reasons for varying from the various things that we've varied from. The designated permitted area, I think we've already covered off. I think it's worth saying we've permitted this before, nothing's changed. It would be irrational to then refuse based on those grounds. So we could, but it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. In terms of varying the condition, we've previously varied the condition about why we're trying to clarify it in terms of the condition is a bit overly broad and it needs to be reworded to capture the things that aren't acceptable whilst not making someone brushing past someone else something that's a technical breach. So that needs to be dealt with. And in terms of clarifying the courtesy bus, I think we've heard the comments on that. The courtesy bus, it's a legitimate business. It is allowed to provide a courtesy bus to its customers. The courtesy bus is also used to transport performers home at the end of the evening, which is a public safety matter. And the flyers are not advertising the premises, they are advertising the bus. And that may be a technicality, but that's how the law works. Quite a lot of the time, the law works on technicalities. I also wanted to cover off some of the other things mentioned in the objections. So our view, given the state of legislation, which we've heard from various sources, including the House Mother who was here earlier, is that licensing is better than use under the exemption. And if you go through the licensing conditions, there are all sorts of things that we've done. The door staff have to look around the exterior of the premises 30 metres. We can't go much further than that because that's not reasonable on the applicant. There's conditions about providing information about support services for things like coercive control, domestic abuse, modern slavery, to be made available for the performers in a private area. That's there as a result of a licensing condition. So the conditions that we've put on, actually, in terms of public sector equality duty, those conditions make sense for all of the PSED, and refusing it means it will use the exemption and it will be less safe. That's the conclusion that we've reached objectively, given the situation. If you look at the condition about access via Montpellier Street, we've also thought about other parts of the public sector equality duty. So someone in a wheelchair who wants to access the premises can do so. So we've specifically thought about equalities in those terms. I also want to address some of the comments made in the objections. So there were comments about protecting children. The premises operates a Challenge 25 policy. So in terms of young people, if you are 18, you should be ID'd in order to go in there. You'd still be allowed in. But if it wasn't licensed, the venue would only have to go, oh, this person looks over 18. So we're actually protecting children with the Challenge 25 policy on the door, and with those issuing the flyers for the courtesy vehicle, there's a Challenge 25 condition on that. And to be fair, the material that people can find on the internet is going to be considerably more problematic than what can be found in this venue. The venue is supervised, etc., etc. The breaches seem to have been mischaracterised by a lot of the objections, including one that seemed to have gone so far as, without providing any evidence, suggesting that sexual abuse had occurred in the premises. And I think I need to make it clear, these aren't the words of the council, these are words of objectors, and there is no evidence to support that. If there was evidence, then both the police licensing team and the council would have acted. And I think if these weren't anonymous, the applicant may well be very aggrieved at what's being said. Going forward, we're going to have to ask licensing to look at these and say, do these reach the point where objections need to be prevented because they are defamatory? And it's unfortunate that people have taken a letter where the police have written and said there were these breaches, but have not objected to the application itself to imply something far more severe with no evidence to back it up. In terms of the representations, I'll reiterate, we've written to so many different organisations which were captured in the question to one of the objectors about who we've written to. I genuinely do not think there is anything more that this council can do, and I would suggest that if people object and want the law changed, they should write to Jess Phillips, MP, via the Home Office, not to her as a constituency MP, but right to her at the Home Office, because they are the only people that can change this law. We only follow the law. So hopefully we will have gone through the public sector equality duty in terms of our officers being satisfied that we have thought about this ourselves. It is rigorous within the legal framework that we have to work within. And I'm sure someone will prod me from one side or the other if they thought we'd missed this out. Councillor Boyes.
It was just while you were talking about that, I just wanted to also point out and to thank the applicant and the solicitor for putting together 12 pages of equality impact assessment report, which actually covers off on so many things, and it's actually quite impressive. The list of references and the care and regard that you are taking to equality and public sector equality duties is clear to see in this document. I think it's good. So not to forget that, because it is.
Right. I think that is pretty much me. So I guess it's now the applicant's final right to reply.
I don't really have too much to comment on, but thank you. I think, again, it's just reiterating, this is a lawful operation. The applicant is well known to the committee and to licensing and police by virtue of their open and transparent operation. I think it's important just to put on the record as well that this venue doesn't operate in isolation. It's not just here we grant you an SEV licence, away you go. These premises are subject to rigorous inspections by both police and by licensing. And I think it's just really important that the public understand that as well. And I'd just like to thank you for your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, now we move to the decision making. So bear with me while I find the page with the point we are voting on. Right, okay. No. I've lost it in the notes, so page 10. My page 10 is the designated premises permitted area map, so bear with me a sec.
Section 7.8.
7.8. Right, there we go, 7.8. So if we vote on 7.8, 8.8a, so having considered all the relevant matters, the committee must decide to, and then A is grant the application as applied for. So we're doing this show of hands? Those in favour? So that is unanimous. The application has been granted. A decision notice will be issued within the legal timeframes. So thank you very much. I'm going to recuse myself from the next one. So whilst we need to find, bring the applicant for that in and swap over the chairs, I'm going to suggest we have a 10-minute comfort break. So if the committee can stand adjourned.
Good evening and welcome to Cheltenham Borough Council Licensing Miscellaneous Committee being held on Wednesday the 5th of February 2025. My name is Councillor Angie Boys, Vice Chair of the committee. This meeting is being streamed live to Cheltenham Borough Council's YouTube channel and the recording of the meeting will be held for 4 years. If there are any breaks in transmission to the YouTube stream, the meeting will be adjourned for a short period until any issues are resolved. To any public present, if you're here to make a representation to the meeting, you are consenting to the use of the sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. Please be aware that CCTV and audio recording is now in operation in the public gallery. The recordings will be held by the council for 5 months. Please note a fire alarm test is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, you should immediately make your way to the nearest exits, which are to the right here and down at the end of the chamber there. Please ensure that your phones are on silent and please remember to use the microphone. So we're going to agenda item 4, application for a transfer of a Hackney carriage vehicle licence. Because this is a regulatory item, members must be present and have heard the proceedings in their entirety to vote on this item. We will ensure that the applicant and the applicant's representative, if they have one, are present in the meeting. I will ask the licensing officer to introduce the report. Members will get an opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. The applicant or their representative, if present, will get an opportunity to ask the licensing officer questions. Any objectors will be given the opportunity to speak. I don't think that's relevant here. The applicant will be given the opportunity to present their application or make their case. We ask applicants to limit this to no more than 10 minutes. Members can ask the applicant questions. Members will debate the matter. Applicant will be given a final right of reply. I'll read the resolution that we are voting on and we will then go to the vote. I would like to invite the Licensing and Public Protection Licensing Officer to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This is an application for a transfer of a Hackney carriage vehicle licence. Mr Taylor is seeking to replace his Hackney carriage wheelchair accessible vehicle, referred to as a WAV, with a saloon vehicle. In 2021, the Council introduced a policy that all Hackney carriages should be WAVs by the 31st of December 2021. This was the final date by which existing saloon vehicle proprietors had to change their vehicle to a WAV or to change to private hire. Mr Taylor changed his existing saloon vehicle to a WAV in August 2021 because of this policy requirement. On 21st of September 2021, the Council determined to halt the implementation of this policy and to deliver a mixed fleet of WAVs and non-WAVs, in line with the Department for Transport best practice guidance. The Council decided that saloon-type vehicles could continue to be licensed, pending the approval of a new and yet-to-be-decided policy. Any new applications would still be required to be a WAV. In 2024, a draft policy was submitted for consultation, which proposed that any driver in Mr Taylor's situation who had changed from a saloon to a WAV when the 2021 policy was produced would be able to revert to a saloon vehicle. This was on the provider that a WAV remained on the fleet. The proposed policy has not yet been implemented following changes to the licensing team, and it is proposed that the policy will be consulted upon again at the end of February 2025. Had Mr Taylor retained his saloon, the proposed vehicle in Appendix 2 would comply with the Euro 6 replacement vehicle standards. The potential justification for members to approve this application would be to consider that discretion should be given in this case, as a saloon vehicle was licensed under vehicle licence HCV 124 until Mr Taylor replaced it with his current WAV as initially required by the 2021 policy. This WAV has been licensed since the 13th of August 2021. A number of vehicle proprietors were allowed to renew saloon vehicles following the September 2021 decision to not implement the WAV requirement for all vehicles. Had Mr Taylor not purchased his WAV, he would have been able to renew his saloon vehicle. The subcommittee is asked to consider the matter and determine whether to grant the request for transfer vehicle application when it is made in due course, by treating it effectively as a renewal with a change of vehicle, or to refuse to request to transfer the licence as it does not adhere to current policy requirements. Just as additional comments, whilst Mr Taylor has a licensed WAV currently, this vehicle is currently suffering from faults which prevent it from being used. Mr Taylor has attempted to replace this vehicle with another WAV, however, finding an affordable vehicle that meets all policy requirements is proving difficult. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yes, my question was, and I think you've covered it there, but I just want to get it clear. Why is Mr. Taylor waited 4 years to decide he wants to go back? Well, he says he can't find an affordable WAV vehicle. I'm just wondering, is that the only reason we've got for changing back, because he can't find a WAV vehicle, or is there more to it than simply that?
So that is one of the reasons. This course has also been opened up because of the last policy consultation, which did propose that drivers in this situation would also be able to revert. So that is also something to consider. The policy has not been implemented, but certainly it's something that we're looking to still proceed with the next consultation.
I'll ask a question if no one else, any more questions? My question is, how many drivers have been in this situation and have we permitted them to renew their licenses?
I don't have the number to hand, but I'm aware that there were a number of drivers when the policy was initially backtracked who did revert. And there have been a few instances since then in which that has also been the case.
Okay, if there's no more questions, Mr. Taylor, it is now your opportunity to address the committee with anything that you would like to say.
Thank you. I've been out of work since just after Christmas, so really I'm just desperate to get back. I've done everything I can to try and find a new WAV replacement. Most of them were worse than my vehicle with the same sort of faults. That's why I've chose to go back to a car, if possible. So I'd like to do that as quickly as possible. So I've got mountain bills and family to look after, and I just want to get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Taylor at this point? No? Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions for you either, actually. Okay, so at this point, we go to the member debate. Before I open this to debate, I will remind you that it's important for you to give due regard to the Council's licensing policy, and that if you deviate from that policy, you give clear reasons for doing so. It's important that you only take into account material licensing considerations and that your decisions are reasonable, proportionate, and rational. Would anyone like to begin?
My understanding is that we were pursuing a policy of encouraging everybody to have a WAV, but that we've kind of set that to be under review, and we've issued a number of licenses already to people who aren't operating WAVs. So from that point of view, I can't really see a good reason to object.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I'm very much with that. I must admit, I was, although it's a very difficult way to, how you're going to decide who's going to drive a WAV and who's going to drive a saloon. But I am very much in favour of having a mixed fleet, albeit it might be very difficult to put together words that will decide who does what. But I think this is thoroughly reasonable, and that this gentleman earn a living.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Okay, I would suggest to cover what the committee members have said and what I think. Obviously, there is no new policy yet, hasn't been implemented, not yet. The driver, Mr. Taylor, clearly wants to work, which is great. We always need taxi drivers. Discretion has been given to other drivers, and a number of other drivers have been permitted. The officer has confirmed that. I think it's interesting you mentioned the mixed fleet, Councillor Wheeler. I'm happy to, I would be happy to treat this as a renewal. And the discourse has been opened up with taxi drivers. It's good to see. We have permitted other drivers to do this, so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't either. And I'll
Can I just make a small
Yes,
comment on that?
yes, of course.
So just to make a small comment on that, in these instances where the drivers have been permitted saloons, it's been the case that they've been reverting to a saloon, having previously held a saloon licence. It is the expectation that new drivers will still require WAVs. So it's more reversion rather than a new application.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, so that brings us to the applicant's right to reply. Mr. Taylor, if there's anything else you'd like to say at this point?
Not really, no. Apart from the fact that, like, you know, I've been doing this 40 years. The council asked me to change to a WAV. I changed to a WAV. It is my understanding now through various garages that silver is no longer a popular choice for colour, and so they don't provide it. So for trying to find a silver WAV is really difficult. You can find a WAV in any colour you like, but usually when the silver ones come up, they've only got 2 seats, not ideal for a taxi. Like wheelchair people don't care what colour the car is as long as they've got one. So it's difficult to find a silver vehicle. So like that's the reason why I want to change back to a car, because you can find loads of silver cars. That's it, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. I just had one last thing to ask the officer. And you're happy with the proposed vehicle? Just to cover off on that.
Yeah, happy with the proposed vehicle. Sorry, happy with the proposed vehicle, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, I think we now move to the vote. I just need to find out what we're voting on.
It's page 76 in mine, and you mentioned 11.
111, okay. And just to confirm that you're happy that you've got reasonings there? Yeah. Okay. So the subcommittee is asked to consider the matter and to determine whether we A, grant the request for a transfer vehicle licence application when it is made in due course by treating it effectively as a renewal with a change of vehicle. Are the committee happy to vote on that? Show of hands? Okay, that has been approved. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming in tonight and for talking to us. Thanks for your time.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Do I have to close this section of the meeting? Agenda item 5. Okay, we're now moving to agenda item 5, Local Government Act 1972, exempt information. In accordance with section 100A4 Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining agenda items, as it is likely that, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the public are present, there will be disclosed to them exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 and 2, part 1, schedule 12A, Local Government Act 1972, namely paragraph 1, information relating to any individual, and paragraph 2, information which is likely to reveal the identity of any individual. And we shall now be moving to an exempt session.